Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Daffy's Roundtable. My guest today is a true legend in the reptile hobby, a master breeder with years of experience and a collection that will blow your mind. From pythons to boas to monitors that I've never even heard of, he's keeping some of the rarest and coolest reptiles in the hobby. I'm, of course, talking about CodyJoe of the Reptile Shop. In this episode, we talk about how he got started, the lessons he's learned from keeping and breeding such a wide variety of reptiles, and what it takes to succeed at his level in the hobby. Whether you're a keeper, a breeder, or just a fan of reptiles, this episode's for you. But before we get into all of that, allow me to thank Exoterra for sponsoring this podcast and making this episode possible. Exoterra makes quality products for our pet reptiles to make them feel at home. Okay, without further ado, everybody please help me welcome CodyJoe. CodyJoe, hello.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you? Thank you very much for coming on.
Good, yeah, thank you.
I'm very excited to do this episode. You are what I would consider a master breeder, and I'm sure we're going to get into that at some point today. But before we get into all of that, give us the CodyJoe story. How did you get started in the hobby?
I just had, I guess, like a born interest. From the time I was a little kid, I was just obsessed with reptiles. And then, I kind of, as a toddler, I grew up kind of in the country. So I was always catching frogs and salamanders and whatnot. And then we moved to a town that had, there was a hibernaculum just on the side of town. So I used to collect garter snakes and keep those. And then from there, I hid them in my bedroom. And they all escaped at one point. So I got in trouble, and then
that's how you got caught.
Yeah, there was garter snakes everywhere.
That's
and then basically I was told if I could afford to buy a snake, then I could have one. And there was a store in the town. It was a town called Cochrane, and there was a store called Pet and Brew. And he sold pets and brewing supplies, and he had a corn snake for $350. And so from there, I used to go around town and collect bottles and cans and stuff. And then there was a thing called the buy and sell. And so I would get free things and post them in the buy and sell for sale, and get money that way. And then I came up with the money, and then I was 8 at the time. And then I got that snake, and then from there it just didn't stop. Just kept getting stuff, and then I think when I was 11 is when I started vending expos and stuff.
Wow!
And at that point, I was breeding biberon's geckos and brown basilisks, and so I just kept all the money, bought more reptiles, traded, and then it just kept escalating. That
is awesome. What was the gecko you were breeding called?
Biberon's gecko.
Okay, I don't even think I've heard of that species.
Oh, I haven't even thought about them in decades. I think it's Pachydactylus biberoni or something.
Cool.
It's like a brown. They're similar to the Tarantola stuff. It's like a brown spotted gecko.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking at pictures on Google right now. That's fascinating. I guess they're just not available in the hobby right now.
Man, other than the ones that I was breeding, I never seen them, but I got them from there was like an 80-year-old woman living in an apartment, and she was breeding thousands of these things. And I had never seen them before that either. And yeah, I just kept getting them from her, and then I had tons of them.
Yeah.
But back then it was cool because you'd go to a show, and I'd be like a little kid, and I'd make like $2,000 in a weekend selling gecko. I think I sold them for like $20.
That's wild.
But it probably wasn't the best, right? Because like $20, here's a gecko.
Yeah.
But that's what it was.
It got you started in moving in the hobby. That's what's important, right?
Yeah.
And you said brown basilisks as well?
Yeah, I did.
We have a showed guest.
He needs supervision.
That's awesome. Who is that? Please introduce your friend there.
Chico.
Nice, adorable. I love it. Chico's getting into things.
Chico, yeah, he's 5 months old, so he's a little bit of a.
That's fun. Have you always been keeping dogs as well, or has it always been just reptiles?
Always dogs. Yeah, like growing up, my mother was a dog groomer.
Cool.
And then I got my first pit bull when I was like 17 or something. And then from there, it's always just been, bullies or like pits.
Yeah.
But
Which
animals
I
all
mean,
around. What's
yeah,
that?
no, 100%. That was awesome. I was just saying, which I mean, it's funny because in Canada, I don't know if that's still, or maybe it was just here in Ontario where they're like by law, then you can't actually keep them, which is the most ridiculous rule on the planet. But
Yeah,
I think they're
that's
slowly
not
starting to fight
Alberta.
it now. No? Okay, cool.
No, yeah, but it's so weird because like you can like most of the bully, which I guess bullies are more what I have now. Most of the bullies come from there, and it's like basically a pit bull. So I
Yeah.
find it so weird.
Yeah, they register them under different things. So my friend had a pit bull, and the vet registered it as a Staffordshire Terrier or something like that. And it's like it's just the word pit bull that scares them, I think.
Yeah,
Which
it's
ridiculous.
like the same dog too. It's so weird.
Yeah, ridiculous. But anyway, enough about the dogs. We're here to talk about reptiles. So
Yeah.
back to the reptiles. So cool. So you went from that to obviously you're keeping and breeding a lot of different things now. When did the reptile shop come in? When did you open that? And what was sort of the inspiration behind opening that?
It ended up happening out of necessity. It was 5 years ago this month.
Wow.
I was in
Congratulations.
Calgary with my girlfriend at the time, and we were I always wanted to do a shop, and Red Deer, like I never knew anything in Red Deer. But I just knew that Red Deer was between Calgary and Edmonton, like the two big cities out here. And I knew that they had nothing because people were always posting in the Facebook groups, like if somebody could deliver supplies or whatever. And so we were talking about maybe making like a 5-year plan to open a store. But then we had an investigator from the city come to our house one morning, and he confronted me about breeding stingrays in the garage. And when I opened the door, I had the whole front living room was all monitor cages.
That's awesome.
And then so he started asking about that, and it ended up being like we would have had to apply for this class 2 land permit, which would have enabled us to use up to 20% of the square footage for a business. But we lived in like this fancy neighborhood, and you had to have a sign on the lawn saying that you're opening a kennel, so the neighbors could complain if they didn't like that. And we were already using like the whole house, so 20% wouldn't work.
Wouldn't cut it. Yeah.
So we basically I honestly don't even know how it worked, like, because we had no savings, we had no money. And I had found this building, luckily, over the weekend. And we just secured the building and then quit our jobs of 9 years. And then we just used our last paychecks from the pet store, because we worked at a pet store in Calgary. And I had all these exoterras that I had tree boas in. So I used the exoterras for the store, and then I just put the tree boas like in tubs. And we kind of just kept flipping stuff. And then, here we are now. Yeah. Well, here I am now.
That's awesome. No, that's such an awesome story. And so how does it work? So obviously you are just based off your Instagram, you're breeding a lot of species. Is that all happening at the store, or do you have like a storefront and sort of a back end facility where the breeding's happening? Or could you break that down for us?
Yeah. So I ended up kind of getting lucky. I got the whole building, and there's it's like 6,700 square feet, like the main floor and the lower level. And then the top is living space. So I live on the top, and then the main level, the front, I don't know, it's like 1,000 square feet, maybe 1,200 square feet or something, is retail store. And then the rest of the main level behind that is breeding and ISO, and then I have a workshop where I build all the PVCs on the back half. And then the lower level, there's 2 basements. One is where all the snakes are, and a lot of lizards too still. And then there's a second basement that I'm still working on, but that's going to be for all the big monitors. So then one basement will only have snakes, and then the other basement will be all big monitors, and then the other half of the main floor will be all the smaller monitors or grow up monitors or whatever. Lots of monitors.
Yeah, I can see that. That's awesome. So lots of monitors, and it seems like lots of snakes as well.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Are you still working with any aquatics? You mentioned you were breeding stingrays at one point. Are you still doing that?
Yeah, I still have like probably like 15 adult rays. And then it's like I have a room it's like half rays and then half rodent racks. So it's
That's all. So you're breeding your own rats as well?
well, just I don't even know how I sell this much live, but yeah, just basically to supply the live, and then I need I pretty much only feed frozen, so if I need anything that eats ASFs or I need extra mice, then I'll use those for myself as well.
Yeah. That's very, very cool. And I'm just as we're talking, he just kind of ducked behind him. But who's behind you? Because he's been kind of popping in and out of the shot the entire time.
Yeah, so
there he is. Yeah,
that's a male quince monitor, and he's about to climb on top of the female.
didn't even see her sitting there. That's awesome. So, and you mentioned you're building the PVC cages. Is this something you've built yourself?
This?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just a big plywood box, basically. That initially came from a buddy of mine. And then when I got the quince, I brought it here and then cut it down and then did the universal rock and stuff on it.
That's awesome.
But the PVC, I basically just, I always built my own cages and stuff, and it helps to build your own to sell in the store. And then we just ended up getting like a few hundred sheets of it. So I'm rebuilding my entire snake area with the design that I prefer. And then I'll be redoing all the store cages too out of PVC. Just because the glass, the glass works good for some stuff. But then with the snakes, and I'm not a fan of it with the monitors either because they climb on the screen. So,
yeah. Do you find it benefits? Some people will say that they prefer breeding in tubs versus breeding in exoterics or glass tanks or whatever. Do you find that there is a benefit using one or the other when it comes to breeding?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I would say there's a place for all of it. I bounce back and forth. Like I even will have some pairs of animals in racks because they completely smash their face on the front of a cage if they can see anything, right? Or some stuff just panics. So yeah, babies, good luck hatching a clutch of, I don't know, whatever baby snake and then housing them in exoterras and trying to get them feeding from the time they hatch. It works way better in a confined space. And then once they're established and feeding, they can go to their final, an enclosure. So I find there is a time for either. Keeping humidity and everything is far easier in a tub than it is in an enclosure, even a PVC enclosure.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
I'm raising baby Brazilian rainbow boa, and I put it in an enclosure, and it was just drying out too much, and it's back in the tub now, and it's doing great. So I absolutely agree with the humidity portion, at least. Yeah,
it's hard to argue when they show you the results. It's like it's doing better here. Why would you force it to be there?
Exactly, for your own viewing pleasure, just so you can see it through the glass. It's like no, you do okay in whatever it is. I don't need to see you right now.
Yeah, well, that's why in the wild, you find them under a stump or under leaf litter or something. You don't see them out on display on a.
Exactly. And so you mentioned monitor room and snake room. How do you choose the species that you want to work with, or what do you choose to focus on? Or how do you choose what you want to focus on?
So I had I've always been drawn to the same species. Like as a little kid, I was always looking at popwin pythons and white lips. Like I've always had the exact same taste. But when I was younger, I had a bit of everything, because you know what I mean? It's like you get what's available to you. So I had like 24 by 2s full of boas, and I had some Amazon tree boas and a bunch of spotted pythons and carpet pythons and stuff. And then we had a house fire, and I ended up losing everything. And so after that, I kind of just decided I noticed adults would always say, like, they would talk about their dream snake was a white-lip python or something, which is an attainable snake. Like, it's not like you can't get it. But then they would have a room full of boas or ball pythons. And like, I always thought that was weird. So after I lost everything, kind of had to restart, I decided I was just going to build like my dream collection where, if somebody were to ask you, you'd say, my dream animals would be this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
So since then, I basically just tried to acquire everything that would be in my dream collection, And it's slowly coming along. But yeah, I just like most of the Indonesian stuff, really, Indo and Australian stuff. And then monitors, I have a lot of different monitors, but my main interest is the Indicus complex. So like the mangrove type monitors, like the blue tails and quints and tricolors and stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm not too familiar with monitors, but that's fascinating. I've seen the Quincy monitors or the Quince monitors at a few stores here, but in general, all the species you seem to be working with, and I don't know if maybe over there on the West Coast it's different, more common species than we have here, but over here it's like you have your common species that you see everywhere, and then once in a while you see something rare or cool pop up. And from what it seems online, it seems that all of those one-off rare or cool species are the ones that you're keeping.
Yeah, and it's the same out here. Probably, far less variety out here than even out where you guys are.
Interesting.
Out here, all you see some Ackies, stuff like that. But yeah, that's the other cool thing I find with the monitors, and the pythons, is there's so many really unique species that are very similar to one another, but totally different, that nobody knows. Like, you just see the same stuff all the time. Like with monitors, right? You're seeing Ackies, Savannahs,
Kimberleys sometimes.
Yeah, but there's, you know what I mean? There's tricolor monitors. Like, that's the coolest thing ever, but...
I'm going to look that up quickly because I don't even think I've heard of this one.
Oh, dude, to me, they're the holy grail of monitors.
Varanus uwanoi? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I've never seen this animal before.
No, they're pretty rare, absolute psychopaths, but...
That blue tail is incredible. Do you have some of these?
Yeah, I have 2 of them.
Wow, okay. And so are you breeding them or planning to breed them?
Well, I ended up with 2 males.
Of course.
Yeah, so I got to get some females. God, they're nuts though, man. The teeth on them are outrageous, but they're psychopaths. Like, if I move my hand near them, they literally will jump like 3 feet off the ground and just like slam at the glass, like trying to get at
Trying
you.
to get it. Wow. Yeah.
So they're psychos, but they're beautiful.
And is there a world where you think you can, tame them down?
I've seen it. Like, a lot of those Indonesian guys, man, their reptile shows our reptile shows are like a market, right? It's just stuff for sale. Whereas their reptile shows, like, they all go up and they judge who's got the nicest and this and that. And those guys will have a big tricolor monitor on their shoulders and they're just patting it and like, but I think you really gotta
put in the work.
Yeah, you gotta put in the work. And if you have something like that in a huge enclosure like this where it can really kind of get away from you and stuff, it's not going to tame down. And that's how I do it. Like, I don't really care if they're tame. So they go into those big cages and that's that.
Yeah, you prefer them in a bigger cage where you can kind of watch them from a distance rather than putting them in something smaller to get them used to you.
Yeah. And it definitely does work. Like, if you start them in a small enclosure where they can't just disappear from you, they'll get so tame to the point where they'll be scratching at the glass and you open the door and they climb out on you.
I've seen that with like some of the smaller species.
Yeah. Even my grow-ups, like I start my raise-up babies in 4x2x2. And they stand there for like the first year or so. And yeah, they get to the point where they're coming and investigating you and you're doing waters or,
Yeah.
but that's about as
And
far as it goes.
yeah, how big do the tricolors get? Like roughly, they're not something as small as an Aki or Kimberly. It looks like from the pictures. It looks like they
No, they have
get
a
decently
really long
sized.
tail. I
Yeah.
would say like 6 feet.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But
So they're
even
up
like,
there.
oh yeah, they're like I guess in the big picture, a mid-size monitor.
Right.
But even these quints, like wherever they are, the male is 4.5 foot. So a tricolor is about the same size, but a longer tail. They got a really long tail on them.
Yeah, that's interesting. Cool. So maybe we'll jump into sort of some of the breeding and some of the work you're doing over there. And I guess my first question is, with this many animals, you're not doing it yourself, are you? Like, obviously, or you might have staff for the store, but do you have people that are specifically set up just to help you with the breeding in the back, or is that all you?
No, that's me. Nobody even goes there and sees any of it. I keep it
Wow.
so isolated.
Yeah.
No, I have a helper who comes and helps me with the store.
Cool.
And then he also does the waters and stuff on like the bit behind the store. That's where all my raise up monitors and all my dwarf monitors and stuff are. And he does all their waters and stuff like that. But in regards to all the breeding stuff, it's just me.
Yeah. Yeah, and do you ever, and this is kind of not on the same topic, but just popped into my head, do you ever have any concerns about cross contaminating, or like, or when you bring in a new animal, I guess, do you have a quarantine room or a quarantine section as well,
Yeah.
or like how do you tackle all that?
So I have a quarantine room, and then anything that comes with a known issue, like say if you get like snakes from Indonesia that come with mites or something, those don't even go into the quarantine room. Those go in the spare bedroom of my apartment.
Okay, super
So
far away.
yeah, if something comes with mites, it'll go into my spare bedroom of my apartment for the better part of a year. And then after that, it'll move into my actual quarantine room.
Wow.
And then it'll stay in there for a while. Depending what it is, it might stay in there for another year or 6 months.
Wow.
And then it would go into my collection. Or if it's for sale, like it'll come out. But anything that goes into my collection gets locked up for a long
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And just since we're on that tangent, I recently had to deal with mites in here, and I did quarantine the snake and everything, and then even after I took it out of quarantine, somehow I guess I missed it or something.
Yeah,
But a few of the snakes in this room, now I have snakes all over the house. So I'm separating them all, make sure nobody else gets hit. But what is your procedure for getting rid of mites or dealing with mites?
Wishing you were dead. Those things are the worst, man.
I've wished I was dead quite a few times over the last couple of months. Yes.
Yeah, you don't even want to eat snakes ever again in your life. For me, any snakes that come in, like I don't care if I sold it to somebody and they're giving it back, or if it's from your best friend. Like you learn. Anything that comes, I don't let people walk around and bring their snakes in and stuff. But anything that I get immediately goes into a container with water. And then I just leave them like that in case they're thirsty for a couple hours, and then they can drink if they want. And then from there, I add Dawn dish soap.
Okay.
And they'll soak in that, and I'll leave them overnight till sometime the next day.
In the Dawn dish soap?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
They're in that Dawn dish soap for at least 12 hours.
Wow.
And it's just, not enough water that they have to swim. Enough water that they can curl up in the container and rest their head on their body and their head's out of the water. So I do it like that, and then I have it on white paper. It'll be a clear container, right? And then I'll just examine to see if there's any mites in there. And if I can't find any, then they go into the quarantine room, and then they go in a tub on white paper towel, and I order Prevenamite from the States. And I just blast it with Prevenamite, and then I'll keep an eye from there. And then because the Prevenamite, the mites pretty much have to come in contact with it, right? So I found sometimes it'll kill mites off a snake, but if a snake has mites, the prevenamite pretty much will stop them from completing their life cycle, right? Because as soon as they climb off of the snake onto the prevenamite, like on the substrate or the walls of the cage, then they die. But when they're on the snake, it doesn't really do much, So that's what the Dawn is for. But yeah, I do them like that on white paper towel, and then I keep an eye. And from there, every 2 weeks, I'll just reblast that setup with prevenamite. And then they'll usually stay like that for whatever it might be, a month, 6 months, a year. It just depends what it is and where it's going. Because I have some guys that I know for a fact, they're anal too. They won't let anybody in their facility. Like, there's not going to be mites. So that snake might get quarantined for a month or two.
Less than, right.
Yeah, whereas if I'm, I go to a show and I do a bunch of deals, pick up a bunch of snakes or something, like that stuff gets treated for way longer. Yeah. Or if I were to get an animal, sometimes I've done it where something shows up and it's just crawling with mites. I'll hit those pretty hard. Normally I wouldn't soak things in Nix, right? People use Nix, which is like the cream rinse for head lice.
Okay.
I'll dilute that with water in a spray bottle, soak the snake in water, and then spray a bunch of Nix in there so that the snake is like bathing in the Nix. And that's kind of like a last ditch effort I know there's a lot of mites on that snake. I'm doing everything I can to just kill all those mites. And then another thing I'll do too is if I know something's got it, I'll keep them in a tub like those that have a seal on the lid,
Yeah.
And the only vent holes will be in the top of the lid. And then you can stick double-sided tape around those vent holes. So any mites, they can't go out an air hole and then onto a rack and then in another. It's just a tub. The only way out of that tub is on the center of the lid. And if they get out of that, they manage to survive the chemical warfare. They're just going to get stuck to the double-sided tape,
Smart, yeah. And so you never see the need to give the snakes anything orally. Like I was told by a friend that they do ivermectin orally, like the super diluted ivermectin orally. Have you ever considered anything like that, or do you think that's not useful?
No, yeah.
Give me attention. Stop talking.
Yeah. I used to use ivermectin like in a spray, but I pretty much, since I moved to the prevenamite, like I used to just use Nix and ivermectin, but since I moved to the prevenamite, now I just do that and the Dawn, and it's better. Especially because when you're dealing with stuff too, like I used to get a ton of wild caught stuff from Indo, and it was like vine snakes and flying snakes, and they drink it. When you're spraying them with Nix, you see them sitting there drinking it. So they can drink Dawn dish soap. It's not going to do anything.
Right.
And then prevenamite is an aerosol spray. So I've just found that to be the best. And it's the most effective, right? Because Nix, if you spray an enclosure with Nix, soon as that Nix dries up, that's it, right? So unless you're constantly treating, and it's like a 21-day life cycle with mites, but nothing kills the eggs. So with the Nix, I find like you'll spray, you'll kill as many mites as are present, and then eggs hatch. And then they go again, right? So
starts the whole cycle.
They're like, oh, I got rid of all the mites. And then like whatever it may be, 3 weeks later, a month later, they're like, oh, I got mites again. But it's because they just hatched and then we're growing and then it's noticeable. Whereas that prevenamite, man, that's that. I use it on everything actually, like snake wise. Anytime I change substrate, I blast the substrate with prevenamite, and I do it in the store too, especially because you don't know, right? Like people come in all day and they're like, oh, we've been touring for the weekend, going to every pet store.
Every pet store, yeah.
So I just, preventative is the best.
Yeah, and it's not harmful for the reptiles at all?
No, well, prevenamide is designed for reptiles. You can spray it on tortoises, they say, but you don't want to. You spray it, and it's an aerosol spray, right? So you spray it on, and then you wait for the cage to air out for whatever 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then you put the animal back.
Okay.
So you don't want to obviously use it near, your tarantulas or anything because they'll be toast.
Right.
But no, it's good. I've never had any issues with it with anything. And I'll use it for lizards too. Sometimes, you get like skinks, wild caught skinks come in with snake mites sometimes.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah. Like those emerald tree skinks or really anything long. Yeah, those long-tailed grass lizards. I've seen them come in a lot with snake mites. So no matter what it is, you kind of gotta just hit it.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. I wasn't very caring about this whole topic before until I got hit with the mites, and now I'm like, it's the scariest thing ever, and like that's why I'm asking all these questions now. I'm like, I gotta get all the information about it. You said you get the preventamite from the States.
Yeah.
Is that something you can cross over with, or is there a Canadian replacement that kind of does the same thing? Or
there is products that I've experimented with. But the problem is nobody gives you the ingredients. Prevenamide especially, they don't give you the ingredients. They keep it a secret. There's spray for birds, one that I can get through Hagen. I've seen at the feed store, there's different sprays. People use
Jurasimite?
Frontline. What's that?
Jurasimite or Frontline, yeah.
Jurasimite, I despise Jurasimite.
Okay.
I've actually had that kill lizards.
Okay, throwing it out. Cool. Good to know.
Yeah, I hate that stuff. No, people use one called Frontline. I think it's for like bed bugs and stuff.
Yeah.
There's a few different ones, but for me, it was like, I just don't know. People use them, and it's like the same thing, right? It's permethrin, so yeah. They seem to work okay. I experimented with them on like crickets and stuff or whatever, but the prevenamide is just made for that, and it works so good that for me it's worth it. Like I have to pay, it's usually like a $80 import fee
to bring it in.
Yeah, but I bring in a box at a time,
Right.
and a box lasts me like, if I bring one in every 2-3 years,
Okay, wow, yeah.
So, but you can, the only place I'm aware of in Canada that sells it, I want to start selling some, but I'm just a hoarder with it because I would hate to have to go without it,
Right.
I think all reptiles sells prevenamite.
All reptiles in Scarborough.
Yeah.
Okay, noted.
Yeah,
Heading there.
And I'll say, don't be stingy with it, like when I first started using prevenamide, I was like, it's okay. But I had gotten in some huge Indo imports, and I had so much, and I was trying to stretch the prevenamide, and it doesn't work as good. You got to don't be afraid to use it,
Be generous with it.
Yeah, because you're trying to make a layer on the substrate and on the walls of the enclosure. So if the mites crawl on it, they're just toast.
Yeah, and when you say substrate, you're talking about actual like soil and substrate, not paper towels.
Yeah, it's designed to mainly use, they say to use it with like loose substrate.
Interesting.
But I'll just do it with paper towels so I can get a better idea, right, of what's there and what's going on. Or with the snakes, I'll use like a light colored shaving or something. I don't like to do it on like cocoa or stuff like that because I need to see it in order to know, right? Like on the paper towel, I could see dead mites. So I do it that way. But yeah, with the lid, like, as long as you don't have a cleanup crew in your cage.
Yes.
Because they're dying,
Yes.
But I've done that too. Like, you get wild caught lizards or whatever, and then they seem clean, and then you see a bump in the scales and you push something out. Well, you got a background in that cage. I'll just completely nuke that cage with prevenamide, seal it up, and nothing goes back in there for a couple months, which by then a mite's life cycle's done anyways. Everything's dead. But
No, that makes sense. And then, so as since we're on that kind of topic, is there anything else that you fear getting into your collection other than mites? Like, are there any diseases? I'm sure there's lots, but are there any specific ones that you're like, I cannot make sure or have to make sure that this does not go anywhere near my animals? There's a lot of talk now about crypto and nido and all these kind of things. Do any of those? Do you worry about them?
Nido, IBD, all that stuff. Those ones are harder though because it's not by eye, right? You got to test for that stuff. But it's, yeah, that stuff. That's where the quarantine comes in as well.
Kind of make sure visually the animal looks okay and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like it's hard to run tests on that stuff for things that are just moving through the store, you know, because when you dump, you know, $1,000 into, you know, a $200 lizard, you have to sell that lizard for $1,500. You know what I mean?
Right.
So for your own collection, yeah, for sure. But yeah, with that stuff, I more so do that if I have a reason to do so. Everything that comes through doesn't get tested for nido or whatever, right? I just quarantine things for a while, and then if something seems off, or you know, maybe something's breaking out with a respiratory infection or something, or in that case, then I'll, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's one of the symptoms to kind of like point towards that respiratory infections.
Yeah, with snakes and stuff, they'll break out with respiratory infections. Yeah, there's so much that you got to worry about, but
yeah,
it's really all that stuff needs to be tested for
sure.
So if you're bringing in stuff from people you don't know or wild caught stuff, then yeah, quarantine it for a while and then run it through the testing before it enters your collection. But also don't cross contaminate, right? Most of that stuff needs cross contamination. So if you're like, I'm always grilling my helper about that too. Like, I'm like, okay, we can't be switching water bowls, or like I'm very particular about that.
Yeah.
In the store, like we don't switch ornaments and water bowls and stuff like that. We keep the same one every time. For
this cage. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've had people be like, oh, you know, it's like way faster if you just have a rack, like a roller rack, right? And then you just grab all the water bowls and then like you fill them and do whatever and then bring them back. And I'm like, no, it's one cage at a time. And then you wash between. And I use, in my sink, I use bleach, like bleach water mix. Because F10 and all that has a sit time, right? So for cleaning the cages, I use that. But for stuff like when we're cleaning water bowls and stuff, it's a bleach spray at the sink, right? Soak it down in bleach, soak the scrub brush in bleach, scrub it, rinse it all off again, and then I do it like that.
Yeah, and do you use the same thing for tongs and snake hooks and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, all of it, but I try and keep it for tongs and stuff. I try and keep for different areas. Too.
Okay.
Like, like baby racks that anything I produce stays in my collection.
Yeah.
Once it leaves and comes into the store, it doesn't go back into my collection.
Right.
So the stuff that I produced and I'm selling is kept completely isolated from the stuff that I purchased and I'm selling. So I just have sets of stuff for each of that, like F10 bottles for each room and separate garbage can. All that stuff is separate.
Okay, yeah, fascinating. Okay, enough about all the negative stuff. Let's get into some of the
I don't want to keep snakes.
yeah, exactly. Everyone listening is like, okay, screw snakes. Yeah, no, honestly, screw snakes, screw mites, screw all that process. Really, it's so much easier to say like I'll deal with it later, but once you have it happen, you like moving forward, you're like I cannot make that same mistake again because it really is so hard to deal with and such a headache and such a pain. But anyway, enough about that. Let's get into some of the cool stuff, some of the stuff you're breeding. Honestly, I wanted to dive into a lot of the pythons that you're working with, but now I feel like maybe we should also touch on monitors. But maybe we'll start with the pythons. It seems that, first of all, is there a season that you like? I'm just opening up your Instagram right now. Over the last 2 weeks alone, you've had Dunn's pythons, which I didn't even know were a thing until I had to Google them. Dunn's pythons, you had pop ones, you had the chondros, I think you had the olives, like a bunch of different pythons seem to be pairing right now. Is it a season thing, or do you put them together now as it's going into winter, or like what's your sort of process for getting them from they're separated to it's time to put them together and lock them up, unless you're not separating them either? Like, yeah, maybe walk us through the python process.
Sure. So I tweak it every year as I learn and figure out what works and what doesn't. But I've always gone with the same base. Like for me, October is like entering my snake breeding season. Because out here, that's when it starts to cool down, right? We're getting pressure changes, winter's coming. So I have always done it at that time of year. Started cooling at night drops and pairing things. Whereas previous, I always just did it then. Whereas now I've kind of learned, and I've had things breed, like I've bred Amazon tree boas at every time of the year. I just had a green tree python lay eggs literally 6 months apart from her previous clutch. Like not 6 months away, but the time of year. It was 100% opposite time of year from the last time she laid eggs. Yeah. So now I watch the animals, and some stuff I'll pair them at the opposite time of year, because that's just when they're in a reproductive cycle.
Right.
But in the big picture, yeah, come October, we start to get crazy pressure changes. And you're going to kind of be all over the place here.
That's completely okay.
I've been the last couple of seasons in a transition from how I was keeping. I literally went from keeping with like, okay, dude, you're heavy. From keeping with like heat tape and all of that, to I transitioned back to how I used to with just basking lights on all the snakes and everything. To now just keeping pretty much just ambient, no basking or anything.
So you heat the room in general?
The whole room, yeah. And I've noticed a lot of changes, like certain animals that have produced lots for me have kind of shifted seasons. It almost doesn't matter what time of year it is. But you can't change the fact that out here, this is the time of year where we really get some crazy pressure changes.
Right.
So the snakes know that. Like your cage could be so well regulated to where the temperature or humidity never changes. They still pick up on barometric pressure. Like they know.
Yeah.
So, and I was with this ambient thing, right? I was doing my daytime and then cutting all heat at night. So it would drop to like 80 degrees at night in the warmer months. And then in the winter, it would drop to 70. Whereas I just recently kind of started to realize that it's not necessary. So I've quit. I just leave the room. The room stays at 85. I can't
year round.
Yeah. Yep. But I can't help it. Like it drops regardless at night for whatever reason to like 82. And then the cages are different, right? Like the room could be 85 and then I could shoot in one cage and that cage could be 82, right? It depends if it's on an exterior wall, if it's on the lower level or higher. So I place animals according to that, right? Males down low, cooler species down low, warmer species up high, whatever. But yeah, now I'm just keeping the same temperature. The room is set to 85. What it gets to is a different story. And I pair everything up like around November, and that might not be their season, right? Like some stuff, a lot of the Australian stuff and everything breeds winter, right? Like December, January, even November sometimes. where it seems like a lot of that Indo stuff and the South American stuff seems to go more closer to spring. But either way, I pair them all at like November, and then I'll watch, right? Especially right now because my seasons are all getting mashed around because I've changed the way I'm keeping everything. So a lot of stuff that was breeding in spring has really started breeding heavy now this year. And you get weird years too, right? But yeah, I pair them November, and then right now I have, like you've seen, right? The Popwins, the olive pythons, the Dunn's pythons, lots of breeding from them right now. All the white lips and ring pythons and all that stuff. And even, well, I guess the emeralds are breeding. The Amazons quite often too, like more spring. So I guarantee you come, February, March, all those white lips and all that stuff are going to start breeding heavy. So, but I leave them together until the job's done, right? Because I'd rather do that than miss the window. Because if you miss your window, who knows? You might get like a half-hearted clutch of, it's half slugs or something because you didn't quite get there in time, or you just might not get anything. So that's why I start pairing early in winter, and then they stay together. They'll kick in whenever they'll kick in.
Yeah, and so you're sort of, when they're not together, you're kind of bulking them up, doing all that, and then you're putting them together. Are you still feeding as much? Do you feed them in the same cage, or do you take one of them out, feed, then put the other one back in, feed, or like what's the process for that?
So the way I go is I'm a very lean feeder. Like I'm definitely not a power feeder by any stretch of the imagination. I'm more of a seasonal guy. So leading up to in summer, end of summer, fall, I'm really pounding the food to them. I feed pretty light through spring and early summer. And then Chico, man.
He just wants to be part of the show.
I don't even he's staring at his reflection in an empty cage. So I'll really feed them heavy leading up to it. And then when I first pair them up, obviously I kind of just stop feeding, right? Because a lot of the stuff I have can be cannibalistic too. Like that's why you don't ever see people breed Popwin pythons for the most part. They eat each other. Like they just eat the male.
Wow.
So you got to be I don't even like to move when I'm in those rooms. And when those species are paired up, like I can't even clean the cage because if I can crack the door and get water,
You worry that's when she'll attack the male?
Oh yeah, man. I had it happen 2 nights ago. Last night? Night before last, I think. I had black white-lip pythons. And those things are idiots, man. And I'm down there and the male seen me. And I was just turning off the lights in the room. He seen me, he stands up, and then the female seen him and she stands up and he struck at the glass. She grabbed his head, wrapped him up, and then so I poured vinegar over them. I keep a big jug of vinegar down there for this reason. They let go of each other, and then I grabbed the hose and was filling up the water dish in his cage just to get him out of there and throw him in the cage. Well, boom, they do it again, wrap each other up. So then I'm going to pull them out, douse them in vinegar again, get them apart. So once I pair them up, I try not to muck around, but I'll leave stuff paired for 2 weeks and see how they go, right? Some stuff will start breeding immediately depending on the time of year. Other stuff won't. And then usually after 2 weeks, I'll give them I'll separate them and give them a meal. And then I kind of gauge it off the animal, right? If stuff is really breeding like crazy, I'll wait because they'll breed like crazy and then they'll slow down for a few days or a week. When they do that, I'll pull them, give the female a big meal. So as soon as my stuff starts, like some people will do that where they bulk up leading up to the breeding season.
Yeah.
And then they don't feed throughout. Whereas I kind of go the opposite, right? I find there's a number of different things that can trigger a female to ovulate. Food seems to be the best for me for tropical snakes.
Yeah.
So that's why I've kind of eliminated the temperature cycling. And I notice if I'm getting a female's building follicles and then they're starting to lock up with a male a lot, just smashing them with food could sometimes push them into an ovulation. So that's what I'll do. I'll wait till they've bred a bit. And then once they're starting to build follicles, whenever they kind of separate and stop breeding for a couple of days, that's when I'll split them up, feed them really heavy. Well, feed the male will eat a regular meal. And the female will either get extra meals or really large meals. And then that seems to be the tipping point for them.
That is fascinating. Fascinating. Yeah. And are you happy that not everything goes at the same time? Because I assume the incubation period for the eggs is probably roughly around the same thing. So if everything's laying eggs at the same time, you're probably caring for thousands of babies at one point.
Yeah. Baby snake season is a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah.
Just trying to get them all feeding, right? And a lot of them are a real bugger. Like the Dominican boas, the Bahama boas, even the baby green tree pythons and Amazon tree boa. Like a lot of that stuff is a real pain.
To get to start eating.
Yeah, the Dominicans and the Bahamas, like everybody who breeds those, there's nobody in Canada, but everybody who breeds those, they live where you can get baby anoles and stuff, and everybody just starts them on baby anoles. If you start them on lizards, that's what they eat. Whereas here, right, we don't have access. We can get anoles for like $10 a piece.
Yeah,
and they're adults, right? No good.
Yeah.
Even a hatchling crested gecko is that's maybe a decent size. But
what about Pictus geckos?
Yeah, when I was breeding vine snakes, I was breeding Pictus geckos. But I haven't since with all those boas and stuff. Like, I mean, they have like 20, they can have way more than that. It goes up like every time. But my last Dominican litter was 20 babies.
Wow.
So to be able to have, and those and the Bahamas, right? To be able to have like 40 freshly hatched geckos every week is like
a lot of work,
man. Yeah, you need a whole other room for geckos. So yeah, I am glad that it spreads out. Those ones too, those species, the Dominican, the Bahamas, they're spring breeders. So they give birth in summer. And then a lot of pretty much stretches out pretty good.
Do you pair those summer breeders or spring breeders at the same time? Are you still pairing them in October, November?
Previously, March was when I was doing them. Those males will get like a kind of a weird, dry, waxy look to them. They'll lose their sheen. They'll immediately go off food. Like they're very predictable, those ones.
But they'll go off food when they want to breed? Sorry to...
Yeah, the males. Okay. They just, in like March, they quit eating. And then they get this like dry, waxy look to them. But this year, I just paired them like a week ago. I figured, why not? Whatever. Like, if they go early, they go early. If they wait till spring, they'll wait till spring. They'll do their thing. Yeah, because you get guys like Tom Crutchfield. He just leaves them together.
Right.
And they breed whenever they breed, right? So I figure, especially since a lot of stuff has thrown me for a loop lately, and I've had a lot more success over the last few seasons breeding stuff that I previously never could breed, because everybody was like, oh, you have to breed them at this time of the year. And but then when I've tried just pairing them randomly on and off all throughout the year, I get babies all of a sudden. So even that stuff, yeah, I've got literally everything of mine is paired now, snake-wise.
That is awesome. And do you have a a specific method or technique to get those babies that are difficult to be to eat without using anoles or geckos? Do you have a method that gets them to eat, or that, like, something that you like to do that you think is more successful?
The one that I've found to be the best for me is I take, oddly enough, this works way better than even live pinkies. I try everything's first meal. I try it to be a live pinky, and if it takes it, it takes it. If not, whatever. But I'll do a hot pinky. Like I'll just have a cup of like scalding hot water.
Yeah.
I'll dip a frozen thawed pinky in there, and then I'll dip the pinky in chick fuzz. I pluck the fuzz off a dead chick.
Okay.
And you coat the pinky with chick fuzz, and you just give it like a little twitch back and forth, forward, back. Give them a little poke on the side, and man, it works.
It works.
Yeah. And then the ones that don't take for a long time, if I need something to carry them over, I use adult mouse tails. I'll cut the tails off adult mice, and then I'll cut the tail in half, and then I can feed 2 snakes. And you do it from the base of the tail first. You just get the snake behind the head, and you kind of corkscrew the tail, and it just slides into their mouth. And I just drop them, let go. And then 90% of the time, they'll get sick of it being in their mouth, trying to spit it out. But the hairs, they go a certain direction, right? So they're almost like a barb, like.
They can't get them out.
Yeah, it goes down one way, but it doesn't want to come up very easy. So eventually they give up trying to spit it out, and they just swallow it. And then that'll give them enough energy just to stretch them until you can get them actually feeding. But something else that I noticed, previously I used to write it off at a certain point. I'd be like, okay, the snake is stressed out. Like, stop trying to get it to eat at this point. Like, I was scared to upset them too much.
Yeah.
Whereas now, I mean, man, you could sit there for 30 minutes and poke and prod at a snake. And they'll almost hit a point where they get fed up and they're just like, okay, whatever. Like,
I'll take it.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas previous, I would have never done that in the past. And now, yeah, I find it works pretty good.
Yeah, funny enough, I have a baby green tree python.
Yeah.
And like tiny hatch. Like it's taken a few meals for me now, but at first I was the same thing, like kind of scared, and I'd try for like 10 minutes and be like, okay, I guess you're not eating today, give up, try again the next day or whatever. Now I'm like, no, you're eating. And like, if you piss it off enough, it'll almost like snap at it to just get it over with and take it. And I don't know if this is the best method or not, but since I've started doing that, it's taken every single meal, no problem.
If it works, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just like, I just get to a big enough size where I'm not worrying about you anymore, and then I'll stop. But it's working great.
Yeah, I find the same. I want to order, because sometimes the pinky gets cold, right? And then you need to heat it again. So I keep meaning to order one of those, those little mini hot plates that you put your coffee on and it keeps your coffee hot.
Yeah.
I want to order one of those. So I just have like a permanent hot cup of water when I'm feeding everything, and you just dunk the pinky, reheat it.
That's very smart. The Dominican boas, you mentioned you're pairing them. Have you successfully bred them before?
Two litters of the Dominicans, yeah.
That's awesome. And how similar are they to what we all know, the BCI?
Not. They used to be in the same genus as the rainbow boas.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, they're a little more similar to them. They don't like it that warm. They seem to prefer to be around like 80 degrees.
Okay.
And mine, when they had basking spots, they never ever would bask other than gravid females. But otherwise, they didn't go near it. So they don't like to be that warm. They're literally like a Brazilian rainbow boa, but they don't like it as humid as a rainbow boa, and they hate water. If you spray them, man, they flip out. You got to try and spray the cage without hitting them.
Interesting.
But they're good. Once the babies are established, right? Because naturally they want to eat lizards. But once you get them eating, they're psycho for food, no problem. They're cool because they're like a crested gecko. Like they'll fire up at night.
Yeah,
So they'll be like red or orange or whatever during the day, but when you see them at night, man, it's like it's way different. They're fired up color wise.
that's fascinating because even just seeing the pictures of them during the day, they are gorgeous snakes. Like I feel
Yeah.
like they're very slept on. They're very, very gorgeous snakes. Like more people should be keeping them. I guess just maybe lack of accessibility here in Canada.
Yeah, they're a funny one. I expected, because to me it was always kind of like a holy grail kind of thing.
Yeah.
I needed that. They're a lot more available in the U.S., but I was shocked kind of on the lack of interest. Like the people who were really diehard about them, they got them from me. But yeah, it blows my mind how they don't sell out each time. Like immediately, they do sell out, they disappear. But yeah, very underrated snake. I think it's just because not a lot of people know about it. But
Yeah, honestly, I didn't know they existed till like 6, 7 months ago. So that could also be another thing, like as you mentioned. Like I've seen all the different types of boas, or to my knowledge, what I thought was all the different types of boas, and then I heard Dominican boa a couple months ago, and I was like, "What is that?" And I looked up pictures, and then I think you posted like maybe 2 weeks after I found out. I had just looked up pictures, everything, and you posted, and I'm like, "Oh, he has them." So yeah, let me know when you have babies.
yeah, I do have some right now still.
Do you?
Um,
Okay, okay. We'll have to talk after
but
this
you know the
episode.
other thing with them, everybody responds and goes, "Oh no, I want one that looks like this," and they send
Right.
me a picture of that one from I think it was Undercurrent Imports or something. But they start out like a rusty color, and then the color comes as they grow.
The reds and almost pinkish colors come out as they grow.
Yeah, they're like a browny, rusty color when they're born, and then the color really after like at about a year, the color really starts to take hold. But they could be everywhere. They could be orange. They could be red. They could end up with like gray and orange.
They're
Um,
fascinating.
yeah, they're nice. Those ones I got, they're actually a partner with a buddy of mine, Daniel. He had them all imported from the U.S. And then when he kind of took a step back from the hobby, we partnered up and I took on all that stuff from the Dominicans and the Bahamas. And then yeah, raised them up and bred them twice now, and this will be the third season.
That's awesome. And you're working with those. Are you also with those species of boas? Are you all? And you mentioned the Amazon tree boas, correct?
Yeah,
Are you
yeah,
are you working with any other type of boas at the moment?
yeah. So this season I'm pairing or paired like the Brazilians already grabbed it. Amazons, emeralds, Brazilians, Bahamas, Dominicans, Dumerals, Suriname red tails, Argentines. I think that's it.
Damn. That is awesome. You really do have the perfect dream collection. That's awesome. Cool. Yeah. And then from the I don't know if there's too many for you to list them, but what are some of the projects you're working with on the Python side? We already listed the chondros, the Duns pythons, the olives, the Papuan pythons. Is there anything else that's really cool? Are you breeding ball pythons? No.
Nope. Did that for a few seasons, but quickly got rid of those. No, I do like water pythons, maclot pythons, sabu pythons, and then the gold and the black white lips, Bismarck ring pythons.
I saw a picture of those on your page. Those are gorgeous.
They're stellar, yeah. No, I think that's about it. And then I have some other stuff like Timor pythons, Madagascar ground boa, but that's stuff that I only have one sex of.
Right. Yeah. Is there any projects that you're looking forward to doing in 2025 that you haven't been able to do yet or haven't been able to get your hands on? Like, is there a species that you're still looking for?
Yeah. I just figured out the Timor python thing because I only have males. But that I don't have at all would be Madagascar tree boas, which is Sanzinia.
Sanzinia, yeah.
which a good friend of mine is working with a group of those. I don't know if he wants to be public or not, but I have a close buddy who he's working with a group of them, and that's where I'll get them from when he produces some. So that's already lined up, and then I have Cuban boas too.
Cool.
But other than that, I think Boelens is that's the pinnacle that
Holy Grail.
Yeah. You can't beat that in regards to snakes.
Yeah, no, I agree. And is it something that's available in the hobby, or is that something that you'd have to go get a specific?
I can get them, but I mean, every year I've had access to them. I can't count the amount of times, but every year it's like, okay, pair up 6 other projects that I'm working on, or get a pair of Boelens. It's like, and then every year they've gone up. Like when I originally had access to Boelens, I could get adults for $1,700. Whereas now you see Boelens they're selling for $10,000 a piece.
Wow.
So I can get them, but I got to have a pretty good breeding season. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it worth it? You have to get a good breeding season, like you said. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Once everything else is paired and I don't need any other animals, then I'll get a pair of Boelens.
Yeah. Is there something, one specific technique or thing that you do that you would attribute to a lot of your success, or is it kind of let them do what they do and I'll just make sure everyone's healthy and doing well?
Honestly, the biggest thing, man, is really observe your animals. Like I used to, like I always say, I used to look for the recipe. Like just tell me to drop it 2 degrees a day until I hit this temperature for this many days. But I found it doesn't work. Well, I mean, it does sometimes, you know what I mean? If you have no idea what you're doing, then that's a good base.
Yeah.
But like, since I've stopped trying to pay attention to what any of these other guys are doing, because I don't really care. Like if you're breeding Boelens pythons, if I copy you exactly, it doesn't mean it's going to work for me, right? Like
different things work for different people for sure.
Yeah. You have so many species where guys are like, you cannot breed them unless you get them down to 60 degrees. And I've bred them without doing any temperature cycle at the opposite time of year as that guy, right?
Yeah.
So the biggest thing for me is like, you almost have to remember to watch your animal more so than paying attention to what you've read or heard, right? Because sometimes you'll be waiting for November to come, but you're like looking at your snake and you're like, man, it looks a little stiff and uncomfortable, and it's sitting in the water on the cool side. Why? And then you feel them and they're full of follicles. Well, if you wait until that season when you were planning, you missed your window now. You're not going to be successful, right?
Right.
You go, oh, okay, this snake is doing this. What does it mean? Boom, pair it up. So the biggest thing for me is just watch the animals, because they will tell you. You tweak it as you go, but for the most part, the animals will tell you where they're at. And you'll notice, right, they might sit every day in this spot. And then all of a sudden for a week now, they're on the cool side, right? That means something. That means put a male in there.
Yeah. That's interesting. So they tend to go to the cooler side when they're almost ready to breed. They don't want to heat themselves up anymore.
Yeah, when they're developing follicles, they'll try and stay cool. So usually they'll stay cool. They'll be in the water, around the water. Wherever the coolest point is. But then after they ovulate and they're now gravid, that's when they'll start to hug the heat. So it's, with snakes, lizards too, I guess. If you see them starting to really favor the cold side, that's probably what they're doing. And to me, that's an indicator. When I see that, even if it's the opposite time of year from what I was planning, I throw a male in there, and more often than not, they'll start locking like crazy.
Fascinating. So we're already over an hour, but I do want to, and it's probably 100 more questions I could ask you, but I do want to quickly jump to, just so we kind of do a full, well-rounded episode. I do want to quickly jump to the monitors as well, because you are working with a lot of really cool monitor species. How how similar are your tactics when it comes to the monitors as to the snakes? Are you also just heating up the entire room? Is it ambient room temperature, or do you have basking lights on them?
There's a lot of heat involved with monitors.
Yeah, I
Um,
bet.
for me, the three big things with monitors: heat, food, nesting. Monitors are like chameleons. Uh, females often die because they're egg bound, and people don't know why they die. And like any lizards, right, they produce infertile eggs, whether they're with a male or not. But most people don't see that because most people don't keep them hot enough, right? Um, so for me, same thing with the monitors. I've always kind of done the monitors the same. I don't do any particular cycling. My cycling for the monitors is feeding a female as much as she'll eat. And that'll often push them into a reproductive cycle. But no, I keep them all the same. They like it really hot. Even my dwarf Australian species, like the Ackies, their basking surface is usually like 148 degrees. And then their cool side is like 90 degrees on the cool spot during the day. And then the warm side is like 100 degrees. Whereas my Indonesian jungle monitors, I call them, the cold spot in their cage is like 80. And then the rest is in the 80s up to, right, as you get closer, it gets 90. And then their basking spot is usually around 125. But they like, I find in general, it seems to me one of the keys is overall high ambient. Because I see, people have perfectly healthy monitors. They're not having much success breeding them. And you look and they've got them in like a wire cage, or, you know what I mean? They got that heavy mesh and they've got a hot basking spot, but you need the entire thing to be hot and humid. Or just hot, depending what it is, right? And then food, and that's pretty much it. And then the nesting, they're very particular, like somewhere down there, this blue bin behind me. That's like the nesting box design I use for all the monitors, just depends on the size. It's just one of those black Home Depot bins. And there's actually two of them stacked inside each other, and there's a heat pad in between the bins. And there's only two bins just to protect the heat pad, right?
Right.
And then that bin is filled with a sand soil mix, more on the sandy side. And there's just a small hole in the lid big enough to get in. And that seems to work for everything. Like the tree monitors lay in that style. They all lay in that style. The Ackies, whatever. But they all seem to lay at like 85 degrees. I temp gun them, and it's always right by the heat pad, 85 degrees. And yeah, and then a lot of food. If you're not feeding them quite enough, then they'll kind of slow down on breeding. But the dwarfs will lay eggs once a month. And then all this indicus complex stuff, they lay every 3 months. So, but if you ease off on the food, then they kind of stop, right? But if your temps are too low and you feed them too much, then they get obese and they die. So it's...
And that's the egg bounding you were talking about?
No, that's from insufficient nesting areas.
Okay.
If there's not a suitable nesting site, then sometimes you get lucky in the lay eggs in the water. But more often than not, they'll just die, right? But no, a lot of people, they hear that they like it hot, so they'll give them a really hot basking spot, but the rest of the cage is like in the 70s or something.
Yeah.
And then they get really obese. So they gotta either be breeding or their system is running really high because of the temperature, So those are the three things I've learned with them: a lot of heat, food, and nesting. is the key to breed all of them. Like I found the tree monitors, the dwarf desert monitors, the jungle monitors. It's pretty much the same principle across the board.
Yeah,
But that's
that
why
makes sense.
all of them are solid. Like I hate, I'll keep some of the baby monitors and exoterras in the store, which I'm replacing with PVCs. But yeah, all my personal monitors, man, I won't keep them in anything with a screen section or a lot of ventilation. They've just got air vents and that's it. It's, you put your face in there and you can feel the air.
You can feel the heat.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And so, you like you said, there's no screen on top. There's just air vents. Does that mean your lights and everything are hung on the inside of the tank?
Yeah, most of mine are mounted on the inside. All these big ones are, I've got holes cut out in the top, and then I've got heat lamps just screwed level, right? So the bulb is up in the dome.
Right.
But there's no screen or anything over it. Because the other problem that monitors will do, right, they need this hot basking spot. But if there's a screen, they climb on it and they'll cling to it and they burn their belly. That's why you see so many monitors with burns on their bellies. So it's hard to do that, right? So even my ones where the bulbs just hang in the cage, the worst thing that's going to happen is the monitor is going to jump and it might hit that bulb for a split second and fall. But that's not going to burn it, right? But if you got a cage on there, he'll get a hold of the cage and he'll hang from the cage and burn the belly.
Yeah,
so that's the
that
other
makes
thing with monitors. Yeah.
And you mentioned chameleons as well. Have you bred chameleons?
I have. I don't like keeping chameleons, to be honest.
No, fair. Yeah.
I actually just had 3 litters of Jackson chameleons. I didn't breed those though. They just came in as gravid imports.
Cool. Okay.
But yeah, I had 80 Xantholophus Jacksons born.
That's fascinating. No, the reason I asked is because you said earlier on, you said it's kind of the same thing for chameleons and monitors where they tend to get egg bound if they don't have those 3 factors. But with chameleons, don't, and I don't keep chameleons, so don't quote me on this, anyone or whatever, but don't they need it a little bit cooler and then a nighttime drop and all that kind of stuff? Do you still think that it's in general people not keeping them hot enough and that's why they're getting egg bound? Because I do hear a lot of cases of like egg bound chameleons.
I think it's all suitable nesting sites.
Suitable nesting sites, okay.
Yeah, because like I've bred chameleons and they're picky about the net. You could have what you think is the perfect nesting site and they're digging and going in and out, but they don't seem satisfied. And then you're like, I don't know what to do. So then you put like 3 other options in there. One that you might even think you're like, oh my God, this is not there. I'm not going to want this. And they'll immediately go in there, burrow down, and then lay eggs. The monitors are the same. Like they're so particular about it. So you could even have some where your regular nest box just isn't doing the trick. And then you throw in a few other options and then boom, within a day you've got eggs. So yeah, some species like that, a lot of the different agamids and stuff, they don't really seem to care. They'll lay behind a plant pot or something, or just in the corner. But yeah, no, these monitors are not like that.
That's super interesting. And do you have to, you said 85 degrees for temperature. Do you have to keep a certain moisture content to the soil? Like I assume you're going in there and you're spraying that as well to keep it more humid, or?
Yeah. So with me, I don't moisten them really. Well, I do, but not. There's literally like 16 to 18 inches of substrate in there. And it's sand and peat, so it holds moisture really well. And then there's just that one hole in the corner of the lid, so it really holds. But I do it like they'll dig a tunnel and they'll lay it in there. So as long as it can hold the structure of a tunnel, then you're good. And the only moistening I do of it is I try and keep the lid clean so I can tell when they're digging, because they'll get dirt all out of the hole and everything. So I just take the hose and I blast off the lid and that water just runs into the box, right? So maybe once a month or something, that box will get a little bit of water added to it. But otherwise, it stays really consistent. Except for the Ackies. It's really hot in there. The Ackie nest boxes, I got to keep an eye on those. Like every 2 weeks, I re-moisten those.
Because if you keep it at a hotter temperature,
Yeah,
then you keep...
the way that I have the Ackie ones is these are so far away from the lights, right? Whereas all my Ackies and Kimberleys and all those, the nest box is just off to the side and directly under the basking light. And then I have my basking rocks coming off of the nest box, right? So one end of that nest box is getting pounded with heat all the time. And like I said, the ambient in those cages during the day is 90 to 100. So those ones evaporate pretty quickly.
Yeah, and when you have them that close to the basking light, do you still put a heat pad in there?
No, those ones are just that. These ones is just because they're, you know what I mean, 7 feet away from the basking lights. In my new monitor basement, I'm going to try and come up with a design where my basking lights are down here. And it'll be more efficient to heat. I'll heat the bottom of the cage and let the heat rise. Yeah. Instead, it's cut in half. It's way hotter up here. You come with a temp gun, and then you get here, and boom, it drops like 5 degrees, right? So
yeah. Also, I just love the sound of my monitor basement, my snake or my monitor room, snake room, like just the difference. So cool, man. So cool. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I bet it's a lot of fun. Awesome. Well, CodyJoe, thank you very, very, very much for coming on and doing this. This was a fascinating episode. I could probably keep you on for another 4 hours, but I won't. You are doing some incredible stuff. You really are what I would consider. I don't know why we don't have this in the reptile world, but in the fish world, they have this like classification where if you have bred a specific amount of fish or whatever, you become considered the master breeder. I think we need to implement this in the reptile hobby. So I think you already would qualify. So I'm counting you as a master breeder. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing some of your secrets and some of your methods. And hopefully we get a chance to do this again. Now, where can people find you?
Instagram is kind of where you'll find all the breeding stuff, which is _reptile_shop. I do have a YouTube channel, which is just the Reptile Shop Red Deer. And then Facebook is the Reptile Shop Red Deer. And then I'm back to working on the website now, nice. Which is just reptileshop.ca.
And would people be able to purchase animals from the website?
I don't like to have it set up so that I'm selling stuff without talking to people.
Cool.
So they can look on there, but then they have to message and talk to me about it.
That makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It'll definitely cause less problems for you long term as well.
Yeah. And then right? Because sometimes people don't know, oh, this needs this thing. They don't know until they talk to you about it. So
yeah. No, that's fascinating. Well, everyone, all those links will be in the description. Go give CodyJoe a follow everywhere. And if you're in the Calgary or Edmonton or Red Deer area, you know where to stop by for your supplies and your snakes already. Go check out the Reptile Shop. Thank you very much, man, for coming on. This was really, truly fascinating. And like I said, hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again very, very soon.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. And everyone else, thank you very much for listening. We'll see you on the next one.